Yes. All right, here we are. It's recording.
All right, hello everybody. This is our official introduction. Thank you so much for joining us for our virtual lunch break or coffee break if you're out east. We really appreciate you being here with us today. I'm Siobhan Lennox. I'm an internationally trained lawyer. I'm called in England and Wales and also British Columbia. I'm actively practicing as a corporate M&A securities lawyer. And I'm also the co-president of the BC chapter of Global Lawyers of Canada. For those of you who don't know who Global Lawyers of Canada are, we are a volunteer-led society who provide mentoring and networking opportunities for internationally trained lawyers looking to practice in Canada. So we support people at all different stages of their process, whether they are newly arriving in Canada or they're studying abroad, or they're actually like seasoned practitioners here in Canada. And we also advocate for a diverse and inclusive legal profession as well. And I get to do these lovely lunches, coffee breaks with Navneet.
Hello, everyone. My name is Navneet Mann, and yes, Siobhan and I have been bringing you guys these virtual lunch breaks for the last month or so, and we'll continue to do that because we're having fun and we're getting lots of good feedback. So I am a practicing lawyer. I'm in civil litigation. I do personal injury law right now. I've kind of come full circle, done quite a few different types of law, mostly in litigation. I went to school in England, also an internationally trained lawyer, and have been practicing now for about 4.5 years. In addition to practicing law, I'm also a life coach, certified life coach, specializing with working with lawyers and other high achieving professionals. I help people kind of navigate the stresses of their careers when they're facing imbalance between their life and career and more frustration. I help them kind of unpack everything that's going on and create a life that's more fulfilled and aligned with what they want in their career and their life. So that is me in a nutshell. And Siobhan and I have kind of joined forces to help guide our communities and our networks through some of the hardships that everyone is facing, specifically during these times. And today, although for some people it's a long weekend and some people it's not, so we wanted to change the format of our lunch and learn just for today to make it more of a Q&A type of lunch break where we're going to be answering some of the questions that we've gotten ahead of time, but also opening the floor to all of you to ask any questions that you may have. And we're going to kind of try to keep it rolling and give everyone the value that you're looking for in today's call. So feel free to interact. During the course of our call, I'm going to leave all the mics on mute just so there isn't any background noise in the recording. But if you have a question, just feel free to wave your arms at us or put it in the chat box. You'll find that if you hover over the bottom of your screen, there's a little chat function, and we'll be answering those questions throughout our session today.
Absolutely, and we did get quite a few questions ahead of time. Some of them were very specific to certain things, and they were really good questions. But what we're going to do is we're going to do a follow-up session. So actually, Global Lawyers of Canada is going to start doing virtual mentor office hours. So there'll be more details of this coming, but we're going to have various different members of Global Lawyers of Canada come on, and our advocates, and they're going to try and answer specific questions about different practice areas, how the practice of law in Canada happens, the process, all sorts of different things. So those questions we're not ignoring. We're just going to save them for a better forum where we have even more experts, to answer those questions for you. So we'll keep you posted on those details. I've just been in discussion with some mentors today about how we're going to do that works best for everybody. Shall we go with one of the first questions that kind of follows on from our virtual lunch break last week, Nav?
Yep.
Okay, so last week for our virtual lunch break, we had a very, very lovely guest, Reza V, who came on. For those of you who missed it, you can catch it on the replay on our YouTube channel on Global Lawyers of Canada. We'll also post a link in the comments on YouTube and on social media afterwards. But Reza came on because he had done 100 events, in-person events, in 100 days, which is mind-blowing to me to think that there's 100 events happening in a 100-day period, but there were, and he went to them. And he wasn't advocating that everybody should do this, but he was sharing what he'd learned from his experience with us about networking and building relationships, professional relationships. And so one of the questions we have received this week was kind of on a similar theme to that, which was, okay, so we've made these connections, and Reza suggested reaching out to people on LinkedIn and following people on LinkedIn. But what do I do now? I've made the connection. What happens in the next step? So Navneet and I were brainstorming around this idea before we came on, and we'd love your input on this as well. So feel free to like chime in if you've got any thoughts. But quite often it's very easy to just make a connection, as in send somebody a connect request. But how do you actually turn that into a real value-driven connection for you and the person you're connecting with? And so one of the things that Navneet and I were talking about was you could actually, rather than initiating the connection immediately, is you could follow that person. So if you happen to be on LinkedIn, rather than clicking the connect button, the 3 little dots by the side, you can click follow if you click on there. And through that, then that person will start to show up in your LinkedIn feed, and you can see posts that they either share themselves or that they comment on other people. And from that, you can get to sort of have a sense of who that person is and whether they're a person that you actually want to follow, whether you're interested in what they're talking about and what they're sharing. And then you can start commenting on those posts as well, and commenting with value. Either if they ask a question, answer the question, throw your opinion in there. There's no right or wrong opinion, just put it in there. Or, you know, say why what they're posting is interesting for you, or why, you know, why it resonated with you, and start a dialogue that way. In the same way that, you know, if a new person started at school when you were at high school, you'd listen to what they were talking about with other people, and then you'd ask them questions, and you'd get them to share, and you'd answer their questions. So it's similar to doing that, but doing it on an online format. And then through that, then you can make a formal connection with them. And then when you make that connection, think ahead of time, what is it about that connection that I want to either add value to this person or for them to give value to me? So one of the things I've suggested to people recently was go in armed with some questions. What are your 3 top questions that you want that person to answer? And why is it you want that person to answer them rather than Joe, who just walked down the street when we could walk down the street? So go in armed with those questions and ask them, and it helps the conversation flow, and it adds a reason for why you're talking to that person. So I've had a couple of conversations last week with some people, and they came up with some incredible questions. I gotta say, like, I was like, oh, I've never been asked that question before. That's cool. And it really made me actually think, and it really made me remember that person afterwards. And these don't have to be groundbreaking questions. It's not a question I get asked very often. And so it was interesting for me to be asked it. And then now that person sticks in my mind because I remember them asking this question, and it pops up. And when I see something, I was able to like forward some information to them that I thought might be relevant based on some of the questions that we talked about. And then they sent me something else that they thought might be relevant to me, which was really interesting. And now I have to go away and actually think about this, because I was like, oh, never thought about it like that before. Interesting. So, you know, now we're starting to have a conversation and have a real like relationship forming on that one. So now, do you have any other thoughts?
Right. No, I think that's really, really valuable. So this is something that we get asked a lot. Specifically, I know a lot of you guys are either new lawyers or NCA students or about to start articles. So like Siobhan said, we will be doing a special mentoring session for that group of people specifically. But to keep this a little bit more broad and applicable to the masses, it's really important to think about networking as a two-way connection. So don't always look at networking as what can I get out of this person and I'm looking for a job and you're so hyper focused on the now. Think about it as a long-term relationship think about it as being able to give value to one another. So the example Siobhan used is great. Like somebody connected with her, asked her a thought-provoking question, and then sent her some stuff based on her interests and maybe something that they discussed, and vice versa. So when you're looking at being able to provide value to the other person, that's how it is. It's getting to know who they are. It's getting to be interested in their work. So if it's a partner at a law firm, an associate that you're interested in working with or learning more about, like it's really approaching things with an intention to be curious, to learn more about their practice areas, to learn more about their work in general. Don't just think you need to connect with other lawyers in order to get a job. Like it's really important for you to build a wider network and know that it's not always who that person is, it's also who they know. So the more deeper connections you're able to forge with people and get to know them on a more personal level, where you're more than just a candidate looking for a job, you'll stick out in their mind. And then when somebody else has something available, they might be able to refer you because they like you, right? So it's all about, we connect with people we know, like, and trust. So those are the three pillars of networking that you're always trying to build. Is how does this person gonna get to know me, and vice versa? How can we start liking each other as people, the way we communicate, and then that is going to build the trust. So it's just something to keep in mind as you're all networking. If you're not doing it now, you will be, and you should always be networking. So like Siobhan said, our last session was with Reza, who did a lot of in-person networking, and the whole intent of that conversation was to shift your networking from being in person to being online, given this pandemic, given the fact that we're all inside, using this as an opportunity, because now you're connected with the whole world and it's all at your fingertips. So learn how to be unique with the way you connect with people, instead of just being generic and sending out a million connection requests, which is what Siobhan and I get all the time on LinkedIn or Facebook. And don't add people on Facebook. Like nobody, you don't need to add people you don't know on Facebook. Go on LinkedIn. It's a professional site. That's where you can forge deeper networking and professional connections. You don't need to see, what their cat or dog are doing on the weekend, and vice versa. They don't need to see that about your life. So keep that intention in place in terms of why you want to connect with this specific person and add value, and vice versa. So just make sure you're having very genuine conversations.
And going on from that, you can share other people's posts on LinkedIn as well to show value. So it doesn't have to just be that you share it in a private message or an email. You can just share it on your profile, but comment as to why you're sharing it with the wider community. Like, why do you think that's relevant for somebody else out there? One person might look at it, but you know what? That one person, it could be the most useful information that they've ever seen. I saw that somebody, you can now use your phone to scan. Well, I was at home the other day and my husband was desperately in need of trying to scan something and he had no idea how to do it. I shared how you did that with him, and then I shared that on social media. The number of people who have since contacted me who I've never spoken to were like, oh my God, that's genius. And now it's started a whole bunch of different conversations because I shared something that I happen to know how to do with everybody else. I thought it was fairly common knowledge, apparently not. But it's useful, right? It's useful to somebody out there. So you can do all sorts of different ways of communicating with people and sharing and building your brand, your own personal brand. So we all know that stores have brands, clothing companies have a brand, but you are a brand in your own right, and that's what's going to draw people into you about how they get to know each other. So definitely start building your brand. Use this opportunity to start building it. Shall we move on to another question?
Yes.
Which one should we move on to next?
So another thing that we have been getting asked a lot is how to keep your inspiration up during this time, how to stay motivated in general. So whether you're working, whether you're studying, and things just kind of seem irrelevant and things seem very uncertain right now. So how do you stay motivated during this time? So again, Siobhan and I have discussed this, and this is something that does come up quite a few times. I'll tell you Yeah, I'll tell you what works for me, and Siobhan will share some of the things that work for her as well. But this isn't a, one size fits all type of situation. It is something that you need to be more disciplined with. So if you are, working and it's hard to stay motivated, what helps is to kind of have your clarity on the type of work that you need to do, or what your goals are, what your deadlines are. Once that's in place, you can work backwards from there. So it's a matter of being very clear on, this is what I need to accomplish because XYZ. It's always the why that helps you accomplish a task more than the task itself. Having a list of tasks is what creates overwhelm, and it makes us feel helpless. But if you know the intent behind why you need to do this task, if you're finishing your NCAs and you know the goal is to one day become a lawyer and be able to, work in this field and accomplish all you want in your career, well, then it starts with finishing these NCAs and studying for these NCAs, and maybe that is your big why. um, so it's being able to kind of keep that in the back of your mind in order to fuel your motivation, and then working backwards to create schedules. For me, working from home right now has been it's been a blessing, but it's also a curse, because you do have all of your time to yourself. I find myself sleeping in more, waking up later, and not necessarily falling into my morning routine as I used to. So it's a matter of me being able to stay motivated, knowing why that's important to me, to set my intentions for the day, to set up like that, and then creating a schedule for myself. So I treat it like a work day. So if you're not working and you're studying, or you're looking for a job, you need to be able to kind of make a schedule for yourself on what works for you and when you're going to schedule in your breaks. That helps me keep the end goal in mind, and stay motivated, because I know that I've got X amount of time to get these tasks done. Another thing that really I think works is being able to kind of separate your tasks as well, in terms of, like batching them together. So if there's something that is more creative, like trying to do all your creative tasks, or something that requires more focus, then making sure you're in a state of mind where you can focus. For some people, that's first thing in the morning. Like for me, that's when I want to do my more important tasks, the ones that are a little bit more grueling, because I know when it becomes after lunch, there's no way I'm going to be sitting there with my head down and being able to focus as well as I could first thing in the morning. So knowing yourself, knowing when you're most productive, knowing when you are a little bit more relaxed, and just setting up your tasks in that order for those parts of your day really helps being able to accomplish those. So those are kind of that's the stuff that works for me, and Siobhan will share some of the stuff that's been working for her.
Absolutely. I mean, if I take when my day-to-day job now obviously is quite different. I'm sitting in our spare bedroom. My husband is literally standing at our kitchen counter with a makeshift stand-up desk, which is the kitchen counter with 2 cardboard boxes, sticky taped together, with his laptop balanced on top of it. That's what he's using as his desk. I'm using a fold-out picnic table pushed up against the spare bed. So obviously it looks a little bit different to what we're used to, which is both going into our separate offices, putting in our noise cancelling headphones, and just working for our day, and just breaking when we're talking to clients. For both of us, he's not a lawyer, by the way. He does something far more interesting. So he's off, doing his thing. So what we've done is we've created a physical space for him to work and a space for me to work. And we have separated out. So during the day, he's incredibly focused. I'm not, it turns out. I have like an attention span of a goldfish. But he can stand there and work for 5 hours straight and not move. And I'm just like, wow, okay. Whereas I get up every 20 minutes and walk around. That's okay though. I know that I can only work in 20-minute batches. So I set myself a target of what I want to accomplish that day. And then I just make it happen during my 20 minutes and then wandering around. But I know I'm not allowed to go out of this door until the coffee break. So it's like every 2 hours, I'm allowed to go and get a new cup of tea. Otherwise I have to stay in this room and not disturb him. So that's how we're making it work right now for us. That's how I'm motivating myself. It's like, oh, in 2 hours, I can leave and get a new cup of tea, but I need to have achieved this, right? It's like, it's that simple for me right now. It's just like chugging it through and rewarding myself with a cup of tea at the end of it. But I remember when I was studying, when I was at law school, when I was doing my NCA exams, you know, I had a target of when the date of the exam was. Now, I know for many of you right now, whether it's the solicitor exam in Ontario, whether it's the PLT exams here in BC, whether it's your NCA exams, whether it's law school, those dates are moving, right? They're completely fluctuating. So it's really hard to kind of do what you would usually do for studying when that date is constantly moving. So I just said, so my suggestion to you guys would be pick whatever date they've given you right now, and then use Nav's technique of going back through from that proposed date, and just imagine that's your exam date. Now, if the exam date gets moved again, doesn't matter. Work to that date you've been given right now and plow through that material. And then if the date gets pushed any further, you've got more time to go back and review it. It just means you've already gone through the material once, and now you might get a second or a third time to go through it. Because you can't, unfortunately, we don't know what's happening in the world. The world is constantly changing, and this was one of our first lunches that we did, was all about how everything is constantly changing right now by like the hour almost. And so it's very hard to like long-term forecast, because we just don't know what's going to happen. So let's pick the things we can control, which is we have a new date of, I think somebody suggested it was July or August. Let's pick that date. That's our new goal date, and we're going to work backwards from that date to make sure we've covered everything. And if the date gets moved, wallow in self-pity for 5 minutes. We're all allowed to do that. Go and eat chocolate, whatever it is that you do when you're feeling bummed out that something's not going the way you'd originally planned. And then we adapt, because as a profession, as lawyers and as professionals, one of the key attributes we all have is that we're adaptable, that we can roll with the changes. And especially if you work in law, clients don't work on the schedule that we want them to work on. They have their own magical mystery schedule that they're on in the background, and we're trying to pigeonhole them into whatever the process is that we have to go through. So we have to be adaptable anyway. This is just you guys showcasing how adaptable you can be, which is something that in the future you're going to be able to use to your advantage, because you're going to have something really tangible and recent to show your adaptability and your flexibleness and different working conditions. So it's about finding the good in the suck that is right now, okay? Which I heard somebody say recently, and I was like, that's such a good saying. I really want to get that in somewhere. Just
how can I use this?
Do you guys have that? Do you have words that you want to get in the conversation during the day?
I actually mix up sayings all the time. So I'll use the beginning of one saying and the end of another saying. So I just try to avoid sayings altogether, because I always say it wrong.
I don't know, I follow this thing. This is complete tangent, just to go off, just to add some levity and some humor to this. I get this word of the day email every day, and it sends me some random word, and it gives me what the meaning is and how you can use it in different sentences. And then I make it my goal to try and use that random word in a sentence. It's fun.
What's today's word?
I don't know, it doesn't come out till 3 o'clock. So you have like from 3 o'clock onwards. So it's kind of cool though.
No, that's great. Another thing I wanted to touch on again, something that Siobhan said was that she gets up every 2 hours for her tea, and that feels good. So it's really important to reward yourself when you are accomplishing your smaller tasks. So don't just think, once I've, completed the whole big goal, that's when I can celebrate. Once I've like passed all my exams, once I've passed the bar, once I've gotten that job or the promotion, then I can celebrate. No, that actually is going to create more frustration. So give yourself a break and break it up into smaller tasks, and celebrate when you've accomplished something off of your to-do list. Like, I love crossing something off my to-do list, and then I give myself a mental break, whether that means, going out for a walk, whether that means maybe ending my day a couple of hours early that day and enjoying the sunshine, or having a glass of wine, or, like back in the day when I could go outside and see friends, like I would reward myself with having some, having dinner or having a chat with friends and stuff. But make sure you're doing whatever feels good for you, and taking those mental breaks, taking a pause, but also patting yourself on the back and saying, that's good, I accomplished this. And that keeps you motivated, because it's actually showing you progress instead of being so hyper focused on the end goal only. Seeing how far you've come from even a month ago, a couple of months ago, it really motivates you to keep going further and further and further. So give yourself a break. Don't be so hard on yourself. I know as lawyers, we always want to get it all done and we want to be there already, but enjoy the ride while you're going on it as well.
The crazy, crazy ride we're going on.
Yeah.
One of the other questions that we got was, what are your thoughts on diversity and inclusion in your areas of practice? So this is a question that when Navneet and I were talking about this earlier, this question is so important to us. We actually want to dedicate an entire lunch. I mean, we could talk for hours on this subject, but we also want to get some people who are specifically working in what they call the D&I space, diversity inclusion space, to come on and give a really well-rounded, balanced answer. So we're going to come back to this, but we're going to share with you a couple of things from both of us around this area to keep you like on tenterhooks for the full lunch that we do on this one. Go for it, Nav.
Okay, so stuff that I've noticed, like I said, I've been in the legal space now for a few years, including my NCA portion. It's been about 7 years that I've been working in law, and I've seen quite a bit. If you listen to my podcast, I've got a podcast called the Speed of Life Show. I've shared some of my story on there. I have seen a lot of adversity and hardships going through law. It is very much still an old school type of mentality, and it's been difficult at times, I won't lie, in not being able to see the diversity, whether it is the color of my skin, whether it is my gender, whether it is where I went to school, the fact that I'm not educated here in Canada. There are a lot of hardships that you do face in this profession and many other professions as well. That being said, over those 7 years, I have seen progress. I have seen a lot of companies coming into the 21st century being able to recognize the benefits and values that different people bring to the table. We all have a very unique set of skills, a very unique set of values, and the benefits that we're able to provide our profession. So, and the profession needs it. It needs all of us and all of our backgrounds. So what I found has helped me feel more comfortable in a landscape that didn't first feel diverse was being able to put my skills first and my interests and stuff like that. So being able to kind of come at it from a different lens and show people that I have a different perspective. So I have noticed, I think the question was like, what are our thoughts? My original thoughts were the fact that it wasn't a very diverse industry and there were a lot of hardships I faced, but now I see more and more women that are partners. I see more and more colored people that are in high level positions in this industry, whether it is a traditional role in a law firm or if you're looking at chief legal officers or legal directors of different companies, you're seeing a lot more diversity now. And that's because there is a lot of value that we all bring to the table. So make sure that you're recognizing that and you're not just trying to conform to who everybody around you is. And it's okay to highlight your differences, and that really makes you unique. And that's going to help with all the other things that we've touched on today in terms of the networking, in terms of staying motivated to accomplish your goals, but also how you can highlight who you are to other future employers and people in this industry. So it's a changing landscape and it's changing very slowly. One of the things I think is going to be very interesting to see is how things land after this pandemic, after we've all been working from home, and how that's going to change the landscape of this industry. But there is a lot of room for growth. I won't lie. It's not even near being there yet, but do know that there is opportunity for everybody in this industry because there are a lot of firms that do celebrate that type of diversity. So look for the places that align with who you are. Look for the types of roles that highlight and allow you to be you and allow you to be unique. Don't feel like you need to conform and be in a box. Because that's what's expected of you. I've done that. I've been there, and I've had a lot of hardships in this career, and it's not a fun place to be. So if you can avoid that for yourself, I would say really know who you are and look for the places that will align with that.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been in the legal space in the UK, the US, and Canada since 2005, 6. So I've been in it a while now. Gosh, that ages me, doesn't it? Dates. And yeah, I started off as a client first, and then I moved into law, through law school and a practitioner. And it's a changing world in terms of diversity and inclusion. When I first started, it was definitely the old boys club, especially being in corporate M&A world. They all looked the same, literally on the pictures, they all looked the same. But as our clients are changing and our clients are becoming more diverse in the way that they look, so are the legal teams that represent them and the other professions that support these companies. We now have more women in C-suite positions. Yes, it's not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but there are more. We have more people of color. We have more people of different ethnic backgrounds. We have more people with different ways of thinking. So yeah, there is more happening now, and it's being done in the public realm rather than behind closed doors. So before, there might be a workshop that was like forced upon lawyers to go to, which was all about diversity and inclusion, how to represent your clients effectively, and how to empathize with them and appreciate their background and where they were coming from. And now it's branded all over the websites. So there is far more out there. If it's a particular area you're interested in or you're concerned around, there are so many incredible organizations out there supporting diversity and inclusion in the workplace. There's the Diversity and Inclusion Council of Canada, who many of the law firms in Canada have joined up with and made a pledge to support their initiatives and their programs. There's organizations, specific legal organizations such as the South Asian Bar Association, the Black Lawyers of Canada, the Women Lawyers of Canada. There's the Women Lawyers Forum through the Canadian Bar Association. There's the Gay and Lesbian and LGBTIQ2 plus organizations. There's FACL, which is the Federation of Asian Canadian Lawyers. SABA, I did that one right, South Asian. Yeah. There's so many. There's the Hellenic.
There's something for everybody. So whatever your your background, your orientation is, there's a lot of organization out there that are supporting this diversity. So I think we are seeing that push, that change towards having more of a diverse industry, and it is happening. I'm definitely seeing that. So don't feel that you are isolated in any way. There is support. And if you specifically are looking for something that is supportive of your background, feel free to reach out to Siobhan or I, because there's probably an organization that we're aware of that we can connect you with.
Absolutely. And not that we're saying that we need to have these separate organizations, but sometimes it's nice to be able to talk to somebody who's going through something similar to you, which is kind of why Global Lawyers of Canada was started, because we're all internationally trained. So we weren't going to law school here in Canada. So we're just one form of organization who's bringing people with a different perspective, a different skill set together. And then as a group, we're able to support one another. So definitely, there's all sorts of organizations out there that we can put you in touch with if there's something very specific you want. But as all those groups grow, they're advocating for a greater diversity and inclusion mandate within the profession and with society in general. So yeah, it's definitely a changing space. There will always be somebody who doesn't believe in it, because we can't change other people, but we can advocate for ourselves, as Nav says, and showcase how our differences are beneficial to those people around them. And because they're not aware of that, we have to spend a little bit of time describing that to them and showing them how our differences are beneficial. Because what you don't know you're missing. So you have to show them what they've been missing out on that one. Anyone got any other questions on that one? Otherwise, we can think of some other questions we've been asked recently.
Yeah, if anyone has any questions, please do feel free to jump in or raise your hand and we can unmute you. This is kind of your opportunity to ask whatever you feel is relevant during these times to your specific situations or general questions as well. So yes, we've got a question. Hi.
Go, Jawad.
Hi, how are you?
Good.
Thank you.
The question that I wanted to ask was just to follow up on the discussion that just happened. I just wanted to ask, when you're talking about self-identifying with a firm or a kind of a firm or a particular character of a firm, can you give us some examples in ways in which you would do it? What exactly would you as a person, or like you can perhaps share some personal experiences that basically tells me what particular characteristic you got attracted to in a particular firm.
Oh, yeah, that's a great question. I love that question. Nav, go for it.
Yeah, I'll share my experience. So like I said, I've been in a few different firms, some of which that were not aligned with who I am as a person and my values. I didn't realize it at the time. It was already when I was in the work that I saw the friction and I noticed myself being really miserable. So I noticed that there was something that I wasn't liking about this particular situation that I was in. I wasn't sure if it was my career in general or if it was the place I was in. And I realized it was actually the firm. So I started this journey on finding the right fit. And what that included, instead of me just making a jump to a different firm that looked good on paper or their website looked attractive, I started connecting with people in different firms. So like we talked about in the networking question that we just answered, I started making those LinkedIn connections. I started emailing and having conversations with people in different firms to actually understand what the day-to-day work was like in their firm, what the atmosphere was like, how they treated their employees, what the culture was like in terms of work-life balance, what the culture was like, how they treated one another, what the mentorship aspects were like. So these were things that I identified as being important to me. And then I would kind of go in it with an inquisitive mindset and try to ask these questions of people that I came across. And just in general, casual types of conversations, whether I was having a coffee with someone or if I was trying to understand what my colleagues were doing in their work, I would ask those types of questions. Because for me, it was really important to have the work-life balance portion, but also to have resources available to me for my growth as a lawyer, my growth as a person, and how I was going to be able to accomplish these things. So that's how I came to my current firm now. I didn't want to make the jump just to be any other place. I wanted to make sure that it was going to be the right fit for me. I met with them 2 or 3 times prior to taking the job. I had talked to other people that knew of that firm, that had experience with that firm, and I realized that this was a more positive place for me to be because there was a lot of opportunities for growth, but there was a lot of support as well. And the atmosphere is a really relaxed atmosphere. It's not a typical law firm where you're feeling this intense pressure all the time, but that was stuff that I had to kind of explore and investigate myself. So does that kind of give you a little bit of information?
It does. It does. It does to some extent. Can I get Siobhan's perspective on this?
Absolutely, yeah. So mine was kind of similar. Mine goes back to, so my first experience of law, as I said earlier, was as a client. So I was working for a company and we were hiring an awful lot of external counsel to do work for us under contract management. And that gave me an exposure to lots and lots of different lawyers. Now, this was in the UK, but it's relevant wherever your legal experience comes from. But I got to work with lawyers from about 10 different law firms of all different sizes. So through that, I got to kind of see the different personalities that came through. And some of those personalities were driven by the firms that they worked for because of some of what had to be done. And from that, it actually spurred me to go to law school. Different story, different day. But that made me kind of think about, oh, okay, I really liked working with this person. I really liked this part of working with this person. And it made me start to think about, okay, what is it that I wanted? So similar to Navneet, what did I want? how did I want to be as a practicing lawyer? And then I took every opportunity available. So whether, like Navneet said, whether it was going for coffee with a lawyer, whether it was attending networking events, whether they were virtual or in-person events, whether it was emailing and how they email, like how they responded on email, whether, you know, they answered my phone call when I called them. And then I did work experience. So I volunteered, which not everyone can do. I was in a fortunate position that I was able to take my summer, and I went and volunteered at 3 different law firms, 3 different sizes of law firms. There was a small family-run law firm in the UK. I then went to a boutique in the US, and I went to a big, mega international firm in the US, and I volunteered with them. So I got to see 3 very different law firms in operation. And then I came back and I, you know, then started applying to law firms where I saw something in their website that resonated with me. And I started reading the biographies of the lawyers who worked there, and not just the lawyers, but the professionals that they show. So the administrators that they show their bios for as well. And I started to read those and figure out, oh, this person does this. I like doing that. So, you know, it was that they ran, or they liked traveling, or they liked cooking, or they had a dog named Timmy. You know, it was anything, but it was something that resonated with me, that made that person human to me. And that's different for every single person. Mm-hmm. And then sometimes I reach out to those people and say, hey, you know what, I'm considering applying. I saw that you were advertising for this position with the firm. And I was reading, you know, doing my research on the firm, and I was reading your bio, and this particular part in your bio was really interesting to me. Would you be available to have like a 5-10 minute phone call with me and tell me a little bit more about it? And then how they responded to that, and then whether we had a follow-up conversation about that, really gave me an insight into the type of people that firm's recruiting, and whether they're people I'm going to want to spend 8-10 hours 5 days a week with for the next few years of my life. And when I moved to Canada, it was a slightly different approach, because I was already a called lawyer and I was going through the NCA process. But I actually took a temping position. So I joined a temping agency that specialized in legal placements. And I worked as a receptionist, as a legal assistant, as a paralegal, as a document management clerk. And I went to, I think, 6 or 7 different legal entities around Vancouver, from in-house legal teams to law firms, boutiques, big law, small law, all sorts of things. And that really helped me work out the different types of structures here in Canada that compared to what I was used to in the UK when I worked there. And that made me then really target the organizations that I felt met the criteria I wanted. But it really came down, and I was really specific. I only applied because I knew I wanted to work in corporate M&A again in securities. I only applied to corporate M&A and securities firms. Didn't even look at anything else, because for me, that was one of the most important criteria. It wasn't just about being able to be a lawyer. It was about the type of law I wanted to practice. Not everyone has that freedom, right? You don't always get that choice, but that to me was important. I also knew that I didn't want to work in big law anymore. I'd worked in big law. You know, I'd done my training contract articling in the UK in a big law firm. I worked as a legal assistant for 4 years in a big law firm here in Canada whilst I was doing my NCA process. So I knew that big law wasn't what I wanted at this point in my career. So I targeted smaller firms. And by targeting them, I mean, I looked at their websites. I asked people at those firms to go for coffee. I read articles that they published, because that gives you a kind of an idea of the type of law they're practicing and the kind of cases they're involved in. And so that's how I personally did it. I don't think there's any right or wrong way to do it, but I think it comes down to you working out what's important to you. And sometimes the only way we can do that is by working out all the things that we don't like and seeing what we're left with. And then from that, hopefully that gives you a smaller pot to look at, rather than oh my God, there's so many options. Which one do I do? And it doesn't matter what stage you're at in your career, whether you're looking at making a lateral move to a different law firm, that becomes even more important in some ways, because you're moving from one entity to another. And by now you should have figured out, well, what are the driving forces behind why I want to move? And I recently was talking to somebody and they were like, it's not really money. Most people say it's money, but it's not. There's other reasons as to why people start looking at moving. And so what are those reasons? And Nav likes to use this term a lot, but basically we peel the onion layers away and we work out, like, what is it right at the bottom in the middle of that onion? Like, what's really getting us to make these moves? And you've got to get comfortable being uncomfortable with whatever the inside of that onion looks like. And then you can figure out what it is you're after. And maybe with the situation we're in right now, where some things are happening at a slightly slower pace than usual, is kind of to our advantage, because we have the time to peel all those onion layers away, work out exactly what it is we're looking for, and then be really targeted with what it is we're trying to achieve. Yep. And Navneet does a lot of this in her coaching. So she's sitting there nodding at me.
I was like, yep, that sounds real good.
See, I do listen when she tells me.
Yeah, you do. No, but it's true. The most important thing you can do is really get to know what you want and what your needs and wants are. And it's true, in the beginning, you might not have all the options. You may just want to get articles, get that, that check mark, move on. But at the core, just understand the things that are your non-negotiables. That's going to take you a really long way and create the least amount of friction in your career. So that's something I would highly encourage you all to do. And it does start with your own personal values. We're all going to have different things that we want and that are non-negotiables. So just understanding that at your very essence is going to be the most important.
And remember that we no longer go into a position and we're going to be there for 20 years. Gone is the day where the place where you are a student and you article at, or you do your training contracts at, or you do your, work experience at, and that's your career until you retire. Those days are gone. Now people move a lot more, and they're stepping stones. And especially if you've come from a different country and you've got different experiences, that was just another stepping stone, really, to get here. And so it's, how do those stepping stones link together? And those will change over time, and your priorities will change. I mean, my priorities when I was, attending law school in the UK were extremely different to how they are now, 10, 12 years later. I'm at a very different stage in my personal life. So one of the reasons for me that I didn't want to work in big law at the moment is my husband quite likes seeing me, I believe, despite what he sometimes might say right now when he's in the other room. But, when I was working in big law in the UK, I'd be gone for 12, 13 hours, 14 hours a day, 6 days a week. Wasn't really conducive to having a husband or a partner, or actually having anyone in my life outside of my office. So that has also changed. Big law is not quite the same as it used to be back then. So it's a matter of for you figuring out what it is you want.
Thank you. Those were very, very helpful answers from both.
A long-winded answer to your question.
It was a very long-winded
Thank you. It was very, very insightful. I actually have 2 follow-up questions whenever I can ask. I would be very happy.
Sure. Does anybody else have any questions as well? We've got about 10 minutes left on our call here. So we'll take Jawad's follow-up questions. We'll try to keep them condensed. And if anybody has any other questions in the meantime, please raise your hand or throw it in the chat.
Yes.
Well, is there this? It shows that this meeting is being recorded. How do I access that recording?
Absolutely, great question. We are going to share it on our YouTube channel. So if you go to YouTube and type in Global Lawyers of Canada, it will be on there later today.
Yep,
Tomorrow at the latest.
We'll also be sharing the links on both Siobhan and I's LinkedIn pages. So feel free to add us or follow us on LinkedIn. And we usually will share the upcoming virtual lunch break, and we'll talk about what we're going to say in the coming Monday. And then also we share the replay right afterwards as well, usually later on in the same day.
Thank you very much.
No problem. We've got Gurminder who's got a question. Let's take Jawad's follow-up question quickly, and then we'll move on to Gurminder's question.
Right. So I think Siobhan mentioned that she volunteered for in certain firms when she moved to Canada. And that was one of the stepping stones that she sort of availed herself to in order to reach the position that she's in today. How do you exactly do that? Because law firms do not exactly, and this might be a very silly question on my part, but law firms do not exactly advertise for volunteering positions.
No.
How do you approach them to say that, hey, I've got something that may be of value to you. I can volunteer. I can actually work for you and be of value to you. Would you consider my application? How do you do that?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. So for me specifically, it was based on networking. It was based off I'd already made connections with people. This connection had been going for some time. And I had built up a relationship with them. They knew that I was going to law school at the time. This was when I was back in the UK. And I'd been talking to them about what they were doing. And, you know, every so often I'd be like, oh, I just learned this. I'm sure you're aware of this, but apparently it's relatively new legislation. Just in case you're not aware, here's the link that school have been circulating for all of us to learn on. And that was one way that I'd been making the connection with them. And then it got to the point where I was like looking for some experience of actually working in a law firm, and it had come up in conversation that they needed, you know, they could use an extra pair of hands for document review. It was just document review. I literally sat there and blacklined 20,000 documents for 3 weeks in preparation for, you know, document switching for people. I'm not a litigator. I'm not very good at these words.
Discovery.
Basically, that was it. Discovery. I literally sat there and just blacklined things. And so that's what I went and did. They needed a person. They needed an extra pair of hands for 3 weeks. And I got to work in a law firm for 3 weeks. And they got me for free, pretty much. I think they paid my expenses. They paid like my bus fare or something. You know, it was something like that. But there's all sorts of things you can do. Like you can do it by like writing an article. Like write about something that you know about, write about something that you're studying right now and share it on social media. And that shows your experience. So it's part of what we go back to with the branding and the networking and the relationship building. If you have a kid, you're not going to let any random person on the street come in and babysit your kid. You want to know who that person is. So it's either a personal recommendation or somebody that you know. It's exactly the same way to get a job or some kind of experience. Yes, some places are going to advertise. They're going to put a job advert out there. But I believe the stat is 60% of jobs are never advertised.
I think even higher.
Possibly even higher than that. It's by word of mouth. So it's so important that you're making a real connection. And if you write an article, you know, it doesn't have to be published in a journal, you know, but you've been talking to somebody through social media or via emails, or you've had a coffee with them in the past, and that article might be relevant to that person. There's no harm in forwarding a copy to them and saying, hey, you know what, when we last met, we were talking about this. I've since written an article based on some research I've done or some readings I've been doing. It might be useful for you. It might not, but here's a copy. But have no expectation from that. You're just sharing it with them. Don't expect an outcome from it, but it's part of building your brand and giving them value, which Navneet was talking about earlier. It's offering them something in return. And this is a long-term process. It's not a short-term win, but that's part of the advantage of being at home right now, is you may have a little bit of freedom to do things like that. And we're not asking you to go away and learn a whole new area of law. Do it about something you know about, something that you're interested in. And it doesn't have to be long.
That is great advice. We've got a
Thank you.
couple more questions that I want to move on to. And I've got just a quick thing to say about what Siobhan is saying that might be helpful to you all as well in terms of this volunteering issue, or opportunity rather. So when I was first looking for a job as well, I wasn't yet called to the bar. I had networked with a lawyer. I was really interested in her firm. She was just a sole practitioner, but I just really, really liked and jived with the type of person she was and the work she was doing. So I was able to meet her for coffee and have a conversation with her. And although she didn't have a job available at the time, months and months later, because I kept connected with her and would just message here and there, she actually offered me a part-time job doing research, and she would pay me by the hour to do legal research. I wasn't yet called to the bar, so it wasn't legal work, but it was research she needed on her litigation files. So it was something that, it was an opportunity. And so seek those opportunities that are not necessarily posted, that are not as obvious. So we're going over time, but there's a couple of questions that I do want to address. First, Gurminder, you said you have a quick question about articling. Feel free to unmute yourself and ask your question.
Yeah, very quickly. First of all, thanks for doing this, both of you. My question is regarding articling and the current, I guess, landscape of things that are going on right now. And I understand that there's no correct answer or general answer, and it's very situation and dependent and contextual. But the question is, with regards to people who have been offered articling positions, and just to provide a little bit more detail, it's for a mid-sized general practice firm, approximately 15 lawyers in the Kitchener-Waterloo area. I have not heard anything different than the offer that was made to start in August or September. But just from what you're seeing in the industry right now, and from what you know, the people that you know, are you finding, based on, I guess, this particular situation, what's kind of the general consensus in terms of what's going on with articling positions?
So from everything that I've been hearing, especially from Ontario, is that everybody wants those articling students to start on their contracted start dates. And the firms are working incredibly hard to make that happen. The reality is, though, that most articling positions, you kind of need to sit with your principal. It's hard to have a mentorship, at least at the beginning relationship, in terms of what we do as lawyers, to be virtual. It's not impossible, but it is more tricky because it's not how the situation is set up, but everybody is pushing for those start dates to happen as planned. Who knows what the situation might be in August, September. They're saying that we should be able to have some form of normality again, with some restrictions in place in the next month or two, is what they're aiming for, the government is, especially here in BC. So, whether that means we work on alternate days in the office, so there's less people in the office at one time, so we can keep 6 feet apart from each other, or those people who can continue to work from home, who knows? But everybody is gunning for those start dates to happen. There is still work for lawyers to do. I don't know of many lawyers that have been let go. So lawyers are still happening. But yeah, we'll just have to wait and see what happens on that landscape. But if you haven't heard anything, assume you are starting on the date that you're contracted for.
Yeah, I know a lot of the law societies are working towards the same thing, is trying to get those contracted start dates to progress the date they're supposed to. There will be some sort of adjustments in terms of the mentorship portion of it, but all of that can happen later on in your articles as well. So I would think to start right away as well, because law is considered an essential service, at least most areas of law are. So there hasn't been any shutdowns as far as I've heard either. So
all right, thank you. I appreciate it.
No problem. So we had a couple of questions came through. So I've been advised that some lawyers are very sensitive on reaching out to them without a colleague referring you to them. I'm not yet sure of Canadian work culture, so just wanted to know what is the right way of approaching lawyers directly through LinkedIn or by email. This kind of goes back to something I was saying earlier on. Follow, if you're going to use LinkedIn, follow them before you make that connection. Follow them, comment on their posts. If they're like one of the many lawyers on LinkedIn who don't post themselves, but they comment on other people's posts, if you're following them, you'll still see those people showing up in your feed. You'll see what they're commenting on, so you can comment on those posts, which then puts you in that sphere. I highly recommend, don't just click connect, send a message with the connection and explain why you're reaching out. I am a foreign trained lawyer. I am currently doing my NCA, my equivalency, don't say NCA exams, they have no idea what that is. I am currently doing my Canadian Law School equivalency exams so that I can practice in law. I see that you practice in X. I'd really appreciate taking a couple of minutes of your time to answer a couple of my questions about the practice of area, about your practice of law that you do. Make it something specific to them. And if they click accept, then send them a follow-up message with what those questions are. And do that. Same if you're going to reach out an email, by all means, you can attach your resume if you want to. They're not going to look at it. But if you want to add it, you can do. They know that you're reaching out because you ultimately want a job. That's how we all make those connections at this point in our career. But ask them a question. Be very focused why that person is the person you're connecting with and not the other person, right? Because there's something about them that interests you. And then add value to them somehow. Okay, so what value can you bring to them? So if they come back with a question, you say, oh, that's really interesting because when I was studying in India or when I was practicing in Lebanon, we did it this way. Great, you've added some value to them. You've shown them some differences somewhere else. Or, oh, that's really interesting. That's really similar to how we've done it. It's good to know that the experience I've had here will be useful, when I start practicing in Canada. It's as simple as that. And then keep those connections going. One of the other questions that we got was that people don't respond to emails when you've met them at events. This kind of goes from there. You're super busy. They're super busy. Emails get missed all the time. Just reach back out and be like, hey, I sent you an email a couple of weeks ago. You probably got missed. It probably got, put into your junk folder for you. It got put in the spam folder, or it just got missed because it wasn't top of your priority list. Just resending it to you again with a follow-on for whatever. There's no harm in reaching out. If they don't want to respond, they're not going to respond. Whatever happens, just keep it polite and keep it humble. A really useful thing that Reza said last week was be humble. You're not entitled to anything. No one is entitled to anything. We have to earn it. So we earn it by building trust, by building a relationship with somebody. So that's what we're doing. So hopefully that answers the two questions that we got over there. Okay.
Yeah, and just to tack onto that before we finish up, like Siobhan said, you do have nothing to lose. So when you're following up on emails, don't let that connection just fall apart. Don't hesitate to follow up. Just give it enough time. Give it a week and a half before you follow up with someone. Because we all miss emails all the time, or we intend to reply to them and just don't come around to it. So that's completely okay. On the front about attaching your resume, just be careful. That's a little bit pushy. People are, I'm probably unlikely to even take that email seriously if someone's just pushing their resume on me without building a connection. So just, feel out the situation and make sure that you have enough of rapport built with that person before you start pushing your resume, because it's really just a cold email. Otherwise they don't know you. So, people will connect with those they know, like, and trust. So keep that in mind and try to build up those three factors. But yeah, that's we've gone a little bit over on time. So I hope that's all okay with you guys in your lunch break. But if you have any questions, always feel free to reach out to us. We'll do our best to accommodate. We do try to batch our questions to be able to serve the masses during these lunch breaks instead of individually going back and forth as much as we can, just so the same question might be applicable to a lot of people, and we want everyone to be able to get those answers. So we will be back next week again with another virtual lunch break. It's always the same LinkedIn, Zoom ID, but we do share our post on LinkedIn as well. So follow us to keep up with that. And other resources that we share on our pages. And we'd love to connect with you all. But unless there's anything else Siobhan wants to add, this is really, really great for you guys to join us, especially on a long weekend. And thank you so much for being a part of this community. And we hope to keep bringing you these types of lives where we can answer your questions, but also teach you different tools and techniques that you can use to excel in your careers.
Absolutely. And yeah, feel free to connect on LinkedIn. Send me your NCA international lawyer specific questions because we are going to do, as I say, a bunch of virtual mentoring office hours. So it'll be a similar format to this, but we will have specific mentors coming on each week. It'll be once a week for about 4 weeks. And we're going to tackle very specific NCA related questions, hopefully, that we've been receiving on multiple occasions. And so that way, hopefully you can all get the same information from a few different people at once. So yeah, feel free to send me those on LinkedIn. I'll add them into our format and we'll publish that information as soon as all my mentors have come back to me on that one. But have a lovely rest of your Monday, whatever time it is on Monday for those of you watching us live. Have a lovely rest of your day, whatever day it is if you're watching us on repeat. And we really look forward to seeing you next Monday for our virtual lunch/coffee break. Take care, everybody. Stay healthy.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.